Ancient Greece, a land of philosophers, epic heroes, and myths that have shaped the world. But beneath its golden reputation lies a shadowy realm of mysteries that defy explanation even today. Picture this, a civilization celebrated for its logic and reason, yet brimming with phenomena so bizarre, they leave modern experts scratching their heads. How could a society so advanced also be home to enigmas that seem to belong in the realm of fantasy? The truth is, for every gleaming temple or groundbreaking discovery, there's a riddle waiting to be unraveled, stories that challenge what we think we know about history itself. Think of the Oracle of Delphi, whose cryptic prophecies swayed kings and armies, or the Antikythera Mechanism, a 2,000-year-old device so sophisticated it's been called the world's first computer. These aren't just curiosities, they're gateways into a past where the line between myth and reality blurs. What if some of these mysteries weren't just legends but clues to forgotten knowledge? From vanishing cities to artifacts that shouldn't exist, ancient Greece holds secrets that refuse to stay buried. And that's just the beginning. In this journey, we're diving deep into 30 of the most baffling phenomena from this legendary civilization, each one a puzzle begging to be solved. Some might send chills down your spine, others will make you question everything you've learned about the ancient world. But one thing's certain, by the end, you'll see Greece in a whole new light, not just as the birthplace of democracy, but as a land where the impossible might just have been possible. Ready to uncover the truth, let's begin. Buried beneath the waves off the coast of a tiny Greek island, a shipwreck from the 1st century before the Common Era held something extraordinary, a corroded lump of bronze and wood that would rewrite history. When divers first pulled it from the wreckage near Antikythera in 1901, they had no idea they'd unearthed the world's most baffling ancient artifact. At first glance, it looked like debris, but decades later, X-rays revealed the truth, a complex system of interlocking gears, precisely crafted with a sophistication that shouldn't have existed for another 1,000 years. This wasn't just any relic. It was the Antikythera Mechanism, a device so advanced, scholars called it the first analog computer. Picture a shoebox-sized machine with dials and inscriptions, capable of predicting lunar eclipses, tracking the cycles of the Olympic Games, and even modeling the erratic movements of planets. The level of engineering is staggering. Some gears have as many as 223 teeth, cut with precision that rivals modern clockmaking. How did ancient Greeks, without the tools we take for granted, achieve such precision? Theories about its purpose are as intricate as the device itself. Some believe it was a teaching tool for philosophers, a cosmic calculator bringing order to the heavens. Others argue it guided sailors, a celestial navigation aid for treacherous voyages. But the most haunting question isn't just what it did, it's why this technology vanished. After the Antikythera Mechanism, nothing like it appears again until the 14th century. Was its knowledge lost in the collapse of ancient civilizations? Or was it, like so many Greek innovations ahead of its time, only to be forgotten and reinvented centuries later? Even now, the mechanism refuses to give up all its secrets. In 2021, researchers discovered hidden text on its fragments, instructions, perhaps, or a user manual for the cosmos. Every new scan peels back another layer, revealing how much we still don't understand about the ingenuity of the ancient world. The Antikythera Mechanism doesn't just challenge our assumptions about history, it whispers of a brilliance that may have once been commonplace, now lost to time. And if they could build this 2,000 years ago, what else did they know? High on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, shrouded in mist and myth, stood the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, home to the most powerful oracle the ancient world had ever known. Pilgrims from across Greece would brave treacherous journeys just to stand before the Pythia, the priestess who channeled the gods' wisdom in frenzied, cryptic verses. Kings and commoners alike brought their most desperate questions. Should we go to war? Will the harvest fail? Who stole my treasure? And somehow, against all odds, her answers, though maddeningly vague, often came true. The rituals were as dramatic as they were mysterious. After bathing in the sacred Castalian spring, the Pythia would descend into the temple's inner chamber, where she'd inhale vapors rising from a fissure in the earth. Then, gripped by divine frenzy, she'd utter prophecies in a voice not her own, while priests scrambled to translate her ramblings into hexameter verse. One famous example, when King Croesus of Lydia asked if he should attack Persia, the oracle replied, "If you cross the river Hollies, a great empire will fall." He did, and it was his empire that crumbled. Modern scientists have a theory about those vapors. Geological surveys reveal Delphi sits atop two intersecting fault lines, where subterranean fractures could have released ethylene gas, a sweet-smelling compound known to induce trances and euphoria. Laboratory experiments show low doses cause a detached, dreamlike state, while higher concentrations lead to violent convulsions, matching ancient accounts of the Pythia's fits. But here's the catch: ethylene dissipates quickly in open air. For the gas theory to hold, the temple's inner chamber would have needed to be airtight, yet no archaeological evidence supports that. Even stranger, the fissure supposedly feeding the vapors has never been found. Then there's the puzzle of her accuracy. How could a woman in a drugged stupor, or even a clever fraud, consistently deliver prophecies that came to pass? Some historians argue the priests were master manipulators, gathering intelligence from travelers and framing vague predictions that could fit multiple outcomes. Others suggest the Pythia had a form of synesthesia, interpreting visions through a lens of poetic symbolism. But perhaps the most chilling possibility is that the temple really was a conduit for something beyond our understanding. After all, the Greeks didn't call Delphi the navel of the world for nothing. Even today, the ruins hum with an eerie energy. Visitors report dizziness near the temple's foundations, and seismic activity still rattles the region, as if the earth itself refuses to let its secrets rest. Whether by gas, guile, or genuine divine intervention, the Oracle of Delphi remains one of history's greatest enigmas, a reminder that some mysteries resist even the brightest light of reason. On the sun-baked island of Crete, buried beneath the ruins of a Minoan palace, lay an artifact that would become one of archaeology's greatest puzzles, the Phaistos Disc. Discovered in 1908 by Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernia, this circular slab of fired clay, roughly the size of a dinner plate, is covered on both sides with spiraling symbols pressed into the clay like stamps. At first glance, it might seem like just another ancient relic, but here's what makes it extraordinary. Not a single one of its 241 symbols has ever been definitively deciphered. The disc script is unlike anything else found in the ancient world. 45 distinct pictograms, men running, birds in flight, shields, flowers, are arranged in groups almost like words or phrases, spiraling inward toward the disc's center. But here's the catch: no other artifact from Minoan Crete or anywhere else in Greece bears this writing system. It's as if someone invented an entire language just to craft this one object. Even more baffling, the symbols weren't carved or painted. They were stamped into the clay with individual seals, making this the earliest known example of movable type printing, predating Gutenberg's press by over 3,000 years. Decoding efforts have ranged from scholarly to downright fantastical. Some researchers insist it's a religious hymn or a prayer to the gods, pointing to symbols resembling altars and sacred vessels. Others propose it's a ledger recording shipments of olive oil or pottery. Then there are the fringe theories that it's a blueprint for an ancient weapon, a map to Atlantis, or even an extraterrestrial message. The most tantalizing hypothesis that it's a form of Linear A, the still undeciphered script used by the Minoans. But Linear A's symbols don't match the discs, leaving linguists at a dead end. Part of the problem is the disc's isolation. Without a bilingual inscription, a Rosetta Stone, to bridge the gap, there's no key to crack its code. Even advanced computer algorithms, trained to detect patterns in ancient texts, have failed to find consistent meaning in the symbols. And then there's the eerie possibility that the disc isn't writing at all, but something far more enigmatic: a board game, a musical composition, or even an ancient piece of propaganda, stamped with symbols meant to awe rather than inform. Theories about its origin only deepen the mystery. Was it imported from a lost civilization, a prank by a mischievous scribe, or proof of a writing system so rare no other examples have survived? Whatever the truth, the Phaistos Disc mocks our modern arrogance, the belief that we can unravel any ancient secret with enough technology and time. It sits in the Heraclean Archaeological Museum, silently daring us to understand it while whispering an uncomfortable truth: some codes aren't meant to be broken. More than 2,000 years ago, the philosopher Plato penned a story that would ignite centuries of obsession: the legend of Atlantis. In his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, he describes a mighty island empire beyond the Pillars of Hercules, boasting advanced technology, grandiose architecture, and unimaginable wealth. But in a single day and night of catastrophe, the entire civilization sank beneath the waves, vanishing without a trace. Was this a cautionary tale about hubris, or could there be a kernel of truth buried in the myth? Plato's account is frustratingly specific yet shrouded in ambiguity. He claims the story came from Solon, who heard it from Egyptian priests who spoke of events 9,000 years prior. The details are vivid concentric rings of water and land, a royal palace adorned with orichalcum, a mysterious metal that glowed like fire. But here's the twist: Plato presents Atlantis as part of a philosophical debate, using it to illustrate the dangers of arrogance and moral decay. So was it ever meant to be taken literally, or was it simply a brilliant metaphor, a fictional foil to idealize Athens? Modern searches for Atlantis have spun into wild directions, with candidates proposed from the Mediterranean to the Caribbean. One leading theory points to Santorini, the volcanic island whose eruption in the 16th century before the Common Era decimated the Minoan civilization. The parallels are striking: a sophisticated society wiped out by natural disaster, with geological evidence showing parts of the island collapsed into the sea. But Santorini's timeline doesn't match Plato's, and the scale is far smaller than HI's Chinese letter vast continent-sized kingdom. Then there's the Azores hypothesis. Satellite images reveal underwater structures near the archipelago, and some claim these could be remnants of Atlantis's road-like formations. Others argue for locations like the marshlands of southern Spain or even Antarctica. But without physical proof, a slab of orichalcum, an inscription naming Atlantis, these theories remain speculative. The real enigma isn't just where Atlantis might have been, but why Plato's story resonates so deeply. Perhaps it taps into a universal fear, the idea that even the greatest civilizations can crumble overnight. Or maybe, buried in the layers of allegory, there's a whisper of a real catastrophe, a memory so old it's twisted into myth. Until someone dredges up a golden statue from the deep or deciphers an ancient map, Atlantis will keep its secrets suspended between history and imagination. And that's exactly how Plato might have wanted it. For nearly 2,000 years, the most powerful secret in the ancient world wasn't guarded by soldiers or locked in a vault. It was whispered in the darkness of a torchlit cavern near Athens. The Eleusinian Mysteries, sacred rites dedicated to Demeter and her daughter Persephone, were so revered that even the greatest minds of antiquity, Plato, Aristotle, Cicero, underwent initiation, yet none ever broke their oath of silence. What could have been so profound, so terrifying, or so beautiful that it compelled absolute secrecy for centuries? The rituals began with a procession along the Sacred Way, a 15-mile march from Athens to the temple complex at Eleusis. Initiates fasted, bathed in the sea, and sacrificed pigs, but the heart of the mysteries unfolded in the Telesterion, a vast hall where thousands gathered in utter darkness. Ancient sources hint at what happened next: visions of blinding light, the wailing of goddesses, and a moment of revelation so transformative it was said to erase the fear of death. The key to this experience might have been kykeon, a barley and mint potion some scholars believe contained ergot, a fungus with LSD-like properties. Imagine drinking a brew that dissolved the boundary between the living and the dead, letting initiates see Persephone's return from the underworld not as a myth, but as a visceral, personal encounter. Yet the truth is maddeningly elusive. No scrolls detail the rites, no murals depict them. Even the ruins of the Telesterion offer scant clues, just a maze of seats and a central platform where something inexplicable occurred. The penalty for revealing the secrets was death, and the ancient world took that threat seriously. When the comedian Aeschylus was accused of leaking elements of the ritual in a play, an angry mob nearly stoned him to death before he proved his innocence. Modern theories range from the pragmatic to the fantastical. Some argue the mysteries were an elaborate theatrical performance, using smoke, mirrors, and hallucinogens to simulate divine encounters. Others suggest initiates underwent sensory deprivation, their minds primed by days of fasting and chanting. Then there's the radical idea that the priests of Eleusis possessed genuine esoteric knowledge, perhaps about the afterlife or the cyclical nature of existence, so potent it had to be protected at all costs. The mysteries thrived for centuries until the rise of Christianity stamped them out in the 4th century. But their legacy lingers in the most tantalizing way. Countless initiates claimed their night in the Telesterion was the defining moment of their lives, yet not one ever wrote down why. Whatever they experienced was so powerful, so sacred, that even under torture they took it to their graves. And that silence, more than anything, makes you wonder, what could possibly be worth such devotion? Deep in the heart of Crete, beneath the ruins of the great palace at Knossos, lies a structure so bewildering that it blurred the line between myth and reality, the legendary Labyrinth of the Minotaur. According to the tale, King Minos commissioned the maze to imprison the monstrous half-man, half-bull offspring of his queen and a sacred bull, demanding a gruesome tribute of Athenian youths to feed the beast. But could this chilling story have roots in tangible history, hidden within the sprawling corridors of Knossos itself? The palace's layout is a maze in every sense. With its hundreds of interconnected rooms, twisting passageways, and sudden dead ends, it's easy to see how early explorers, including archaeologist Arthur Evans, believed they'd found the labyrinth's inspiration. Evans' reconstructions in the early 20th century added fuel to the fire. His team repainted walls, restored frescoes, and even rebuilt entire sections with modern concrete, creating a vision of Knossos that leaned heavily into the myth. But here's the controversy. Many scholars argue Evans didn't just restore the palace, he reinvented it, blending fact with fantasy to match the legend he adored. Take the famous throne room, where Evans claimed Minos himself held court. The space features a stone seat flanked by frescoes of griffins, but there's no concrete evidence linking it to royalty or the Minotaur. Even the iconic bull-leaping frescoes showing acrobats vaulting over massive beasts might say more about Minoan culture than myth. Bulls were sacred in Crete, and ritual games involving them could have morphed over centuries into tales of a bloodthirsty hybrid lurking in the shadows. Then there's the Minotaur itself. Some historians propose the creature symbolizes a darker truth, perhaps a brutal king who demanded human sacrifices, or a masked priest performing rituals in a bull's guise. Others point to the palace's storage rooms, where giant pithoi clay jars for grain might have inspired stories of imprisoned victims. And let's not forget the double-axe symbols carved throughout Knossos called labries, a word some argue gave the labyrinth its name. But the most compelling clue might lie beneath the palace. In 2014, a team using ground-penetrating radar discovered a vast subterranean network of tunnels near Knossos, eerily mirroring the descriptions of the Labyrinth. Were these natural formations or deliberate constructions lost to time? The answer remains buried, much like the truth behind the myth. Whether the Labyrinth was real or born from the whispers of awestruck visitors, one thing's certain: Knossos refuses to surrender its secrets. Every corridor, every fresco, every crumbling stairway invites us to wander deeper into the puzzle, just as Theseus once did, thread in hand, stepping into the darkness where history and legend collide. Imagine standing on the shores of Rhodes in the 3rd century before the Common Era, gazing up at a bronze giant so massive its shadow swallowed entire ships. This was the Colossus of Rhodes, a towering statue of the sun god Helios, built to celebrate the island's victory over an invading army. Stretching over 100 feet tall, it was so awe-inspiring that it earned a place among the 7 wonders of the ancient world. But here's the twist: despite its fame, almost everything we think we know about the Colossus might be wrong. For starters, that iconic image of the statue straddling the harbor entrance with legs wide apart. It's pure myth, a Renaissance-era fantasy that stuck. Ancient accounts describe the Colossus standing near the harbor, not over it. Engineering experts point out that the bronze structure, while impressive, couldn't have spanned such a distance without collapsing under its own weight. Instead, it likely stood on a pedestal near the Mandrake harbor, one hand shielding its eyes as if gazing seaward, its gilded skin glinting in the sunlight. So why has no trace of it been found? The answer lies in the brutal power of nature and human greed. Just 56 years after its completion, an earthquake toppled the Colossus, snapping it at the knees. The people of Rhodes, warned by an oracle not to rebuild, left the ruins where they lay for nearly 9 centuries. Then, in the 7th century, Arab invaders scavenged the bronze, melting it down or selling it off. Legend says it took 900 camels to haul away the fragments. By the time archaeologists began digging, every shred of the statue had vanished, leaving only whispers in ancient texts and a handful of disputed foundation stones. The real mystery isn't just where the Colossus stood, but how it was built at all. Modern engineers still debate the techniques used to shape and balance such a colossal bronze figure. Some suggest an internal framework of iron bars and stone weights, while others propose an innovative system of ramps and scaffolding. And then there's the haunting question: if a wonder this magnificent could disappear so completely, what else have we lost to time? The Colossus reminds us that even the grandest achievements are fragile, and that history often leaves us with more questions than answers. In the 7th century, as Arab fleets closed in on Constantinople, the Byzantine Empire unleashed a weapon so terrifying it seemed plucked from the nightmares of their enemies. Greek fire, a liquid inferno that clung to ships and water alike, burning even in the harshest storms, became the ultimate naval deterrent. Imagine the horror of sailors watching flames race across the waves toward them, defying all efforts to douse them with water. Some accounts describe the fire as living, twisting through the air with a roar like dragon's breath, igniting everything it touched. What made this weapon so devastating was its eerie resemblance to modern napalm. Historical texts suggest it was a volatile mix of quicklime, petroleum, and other secret ingredients, possibly including pine resin or sulfur. When pumped through pressurized bronze tubes mounted on Byzantine ships, the substance would ignite upon contact with air, creating an inescapable wall of fire. The effect was psychological as much as physical. Enemy crews would often leap into the sea rather than face immolation, even if it meant drowning. The Byzantines guarded the formula with obsessive secrecy. Only the imperial family and a handful of trusted chemists knew its exact composition, with production confined to fortified workshops. Workers were reportedly sworn to silence under penalty of death, and the ingredient list was never written down in full. This level of security was unprecedented even in an era of military espionage, Greek fire remained an enigma to rival nations. When the Emperor Constantine Porphyrogenitus wrote a manual on statecraft for his son, he included a chilling warning: never reveal the secret of the fire, even if foreign envoys beg for it, for they will use it against us. Then, abruptly, the knowledge vanished. By the time Constantinople fell to the Ottomans in 1453, Greek fire had faded into legend. Historians still debate why such a pivotal weapon was lost. Some blame the empire's decline as resources dwindled. The specialized workshops may have disbanded, taking their secrets to the grave. Others suspect the recipe was deliberately destroyed to prevent its use by enemies during the city's final desperate hours. The most haunting theory, that the formula survived, hidden in some forgotten manuscript or oral tradition, waiting to be rediscovered. Modern attempts to recreate Greek fire have yielded mixtures that burn similarly, but none match the descriptions of its unstoppable, water-resistant fury. Archaeologists hunt for traces in sunken Byzantine ships, while chemists analyze ancient texts for overlooked clues. Yet the true formula remains as elusive as ever, a reminder that even the most powerful weapons can be swallowed by time, leaving behind only echoes of their terrifying glory. The greatest treasure hunt in history didn't start with a map or a cryptic clue. It began with the death of a legend. When Alexander the Great breathed his last in Babylon in 323 before the Common Era, his body became the ultimate prize. Kings, emperors, and scholars have spent centuries searching for his tomb, chasing whispers through the labyrinthine catacombs beneath Alexandria and beyond. Yet despite countless expeditions, cutting-edge technology, and even the occasional wild claim of discovery, Alexander's final resting place remains one of antiquity's most tantalizing unsolved riddles. The journey of his body reads like an epic in itself. Initially buried in Memphis, then moved to Alexandria by his general Ptolemy, Alexander's golden sarcophagus was said to rest in a mausoleum so magnificent Julius Caesar wept at its sight. Roman emperors from Augustus to Caracalla made pilgrimages to pay homage, leaving offerings of gold and jewels, but by the 4th century the trail goes cold. Some accounts blame riots or natural disasters, others suspect a secret relocation to prevent desecration. The irony: the man who conquered the known world couldn't protect his own corpse from vanishing into myth. What makes the search so maddening is the flood of conflicting clues. Ancient writers like Strabo and Plutarch describe the tomb's grandeur, a marble wonder adorned with statues and guarded by oracles. Medieval Arab historians, however, place it near the city's central crossroads, while later Christian texts suggest it was repurposed as a church. Then there's the infamous Alexander Romance, a fantastical account claiming his body was stolen and taken to the Siwa oasis, hidden in a glass coffin that defied decay. With each new lead, the mystery deepens. Modern technology should have cracked the case by now, but Alexandria refuses to cooperate. The city sits atop layers of ruins, its ancient quarters submerged by earthquakes and rising seas. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed tantalizing voids beneath busy streets, while satellite imaging hints at undiscovered chambers. Yet every dig seems to hit a dead end. In 2014, a team claimed to have found Alexander's tomb in the Amphipolis region of Greece, pointing to a lavish burial mound. The discovery made headlines until scholars noted the timeline didn't match. The structure was built decades after Alexander's death, likely for a relative. The most haunting theory, that his tomb was never lost at all. Some argue it lies in plain sight, buried beneath Alexandria's Mosque of Nabi Daniel, where a hidden underground chamber eludes exploration due to religious restrictions. Others believe it was dismantled centuries ago, its gold melted down, its relics scattered. But perhaps the real reason we haven't found Alexander is poetic justice. A conqueror who spent his life erasing borders in death defies the very concept of being pinned down. His tomb isn't just a physical location, it's the last frontier of his legend, daring us to keep searching even when the trail has gone cold. and as long as that enigma endures, the greatest treasure hunt in history isn't over, it's just waiting for the next clue. In the dead of night, under the cloak of darkness, teenage boys slipped through the rugged terrain of Laconia with chilling purpose. This was Sparta's Crypteia, a ritual so brutal it blurred the line between tradition and terror. Far from the glorious battles and disciplined warriors of popular legend, the Crypteia reveals a darker side of Spartan society, one where young men were sent to hone their skills not on the battlefield, but through a campaign of stealth, violence, and psychological warfare against the enslaved Helot population. Ancient sources describe the Crypteia as the ultimate test for Spartan youths nearing the end of their grueling agoge training. Armed only with daggers and minimal supplies, they were ordered to vanish into the wilderness for months, surviving off the land while carrying out a macabre mission to murder Helots, especially those who showed signs of strength or leadership. The philosopher Plato called it an exercise in hardiness, but others saw it as systematic oppression, a way to keep the Helots in perpetual fear and prevent rebellion. The sheer randomness of the attacks was the point. No Helot ever knew when or where the next strike would come, turning their daily lives into an unending nightmare. But was this ritual merely state-sponsored terrorism? Some historians argue the Crypteia served a dual purpose. By targeting the strongest Helots, Sparta eliminated potential threats before they could organize. At the same time, it blooded future warriors in the art of ambush and psychological dominance, skills crucial for a society perpetually on the brink of war. There's also evidence that the killings weren't entirely indiscriminate. Plutarch mentions a clandestine aspect, the cryptos, or hidden nature of the rite, where Helots deemed dangerous were marked for death by Spartan authorities beforehand, turning the youths into covert assassins rather than mere murderers. Yet the Crypteia's brutality raises haunting questions. How much of it was mythologized to intimidate Sparta's enemies? Contemporary accounts are scarce, and later writers like Plutarch may have exaggerated its ferocity to underscore Spartan otherness. Archaeological evidence offers little clarity. Unlike battlefields, clandestine killings leave few traces. Even the Helots' perspective is lost to history, voices silenced by time and oppression. Modern parallels are unsettling. The Crypteia echoes initiation rites in extremist groups where violence bonds members to a cause. But in Sparta, this wasn't fringe behavior, it was institutional, celebrated as a civic duty. The chilling takeaway: Sparta's legendary strength came at a moral cost, and the Crypteia forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the most effective warriors aren't forged in honorable combat, but in the shadows where cruelty becomes curriculum. And that legacy, more than any battlefield triumph, may be Sparta's most enduring and disturbing mystery. High in the misty mountains of Epirus, nestled between whispering pines and rugged cliffs, stood the oldest oracle in Greece, Dodona. Here, beneath the sacred oak of Zeus, pilgrims gathered to hear the voice of the god himself. Not through a priestess in a trance, not through cryptic carvings, but through the very leaves of the tree rustling in the wind. Imagine the scene: a towering oak, its branches swaying as if moved by an unseen hand, its murmurs interpreted by barefoot priests called Seloi, who slept on the earth and listened with their hearts. But was this divine communication, or one of antiquity's most ingenious illusions? The mechanics behind Dodona's talking oak remain as elusive as the whispers of its leaves. Ancient sources describe bronze vessels hung from the branches, catching the wind and amplifying its sound into an eerie chorus. Some historians believe these weren't just decorative. They functioned like primitive wind chimes, calibrated to resonate at specific frequencies. The Seloi might have used them to translate the trees rustling into coded messages, turning random noise into prophetic pronouncements. Picture a priest standing just so, cupping his ear as a gust made a particular bowl hum, then declaring it a sign of Zeus's favor. Yet there's a second, more unsettling layer to the mystery. Dodona sat atop a geological hotspot where underground gases and seismic activity were common. Could natural infrasound, low-frequency vibrations inaudible to humans but known to induce feelings of awe or dread, have enhanced the oracle's power? Modern studies show these frequencies can trigger unease, even hallucinations, making worshippers more susceptible to suggestion. Combine that with the hypnotic sway of the oak and the celloi's theatrical delivery, and you've got a recipe for divine revelation. But perhaps the most fascinating twist isn't how the tree spoke, but why people believed it. Unlike Delphi's cryptic Pythia, Dodona's answers were famously direct, advising on crops, marriages, or voyages with startling clarity. This wasn't just superstition, it was a sophisticated feedback loop. The Seloi, living among the pilgrims, gathered gossip and local knowledge, subtly shaping their prophecies to reflect real-world concerns. A farmer worried about drought. The oak might whisper of impending rain when storm clouds already gathered on the horizon. A merchant fearing pirates, the leaves could warn of delays just as news of raids reached the coast. What makes Dodona extraordinary isn't just the trickery, but the collision of nature, technology, and psychology. The oak wasn't a fraud, it was a mirror, reflecting back the hopes and fears of those who sought its wisdom. And in that reflection, we see a truth more compelling than magic. Sometimes the most powerful voices aren't those of gods, but the ones we're already waiting to hear. The legend is iconic, a lion with impenetrable golden fur, terrorizing the hills of Nemea until Hercules strangled it barehanded as his first labor. But beneath the myth lies a tantalizing possibility. What if the Nemean lion wasn't just a monster conjured by storytellers, but a distorted memory of a real predator that once stalked ancient Greece? Fossil records reveal a startling truth. Lions did roam Europe until around 1000 before the Common Era, with populations surviving in the Balkans even longer. These weren't the African lions we know today, but a larger, heavier subspecies, the Panthera leo-europea, or European cave lion, standing nearly 4 feet at the shoulder with powerful jaws and a thick mane. They were apex predators capable of taking down horses, deer, and even early humans. Could encounters with these formidable beasts have inspired the Nemean lion legend? The parallels are striking. Ancient Greek art often depicts lions with exaggerated features, thick necks, radiant manes, and an aura of invincibility matching descriptions of Hercules' foe. Their invulnerable hide might reflect real observations. European lions had denser fur than their African cousins, potentially making them seem resistant to arrows or spears in fleeting battles. Even the Nemean lions lair a cave with 2 entrances matches known denning habits of large felids. But here's where the mystery deepens. By the time Hercules' myth was formalized in the 8th century before the Common Era, European lions were likely extinct in Greece. So how did the story persist? One theory points to oral tradition. Tales of lions passed down through generations, growing more supernatural with each retelling. Another suggests imported pelts or captive beasts from Mesopotamia fueled the legend. Imagine a Greek villager glimpsing a lion skin brought by traders, already rare and awe-inspiring, easily morphing into stories of a monster slain by a hero. The most compelling clue might lie in place names. Nemea itself could derive from an ancient word for pasture, hinting at a time when lions preyed on livestock, embedding themselves in local memory. Over centuries, a dangerous animal becomes a demon, then a divine test, a pattern seen in myths worldwide. Whether the Nemean lion was flesh and blood or pure symbolism, its legacy endures. The story served a purpose, casting Hercules as the civilizing force conquering primal chaos. But the idea that a real predator lurks beneath the legend makes you wonder what other monsters might be waiting to step out of the shadows and into the light of history. Beneath the tranquil blue waters of the Aegean lies the remnants of one of the most violent volcanic explosions in human history, the eruption of Thera. This wasn't just an eruption, it was an earth-shattering event so powerful it may have reshaped civilizations. But here's where the plot thickens. Scientists and historians still can't agree on when it happened. Was it 1628 before the Common Era, as ice core samples suggest, or closer to 1500, aligning with archaeological evidence from Crete? This isn't just academic nitpicking. The date could rewrite our understanding of everything from the collapse of Minoan palaces to the origins of the Atlantis myth. Let's start with the science. Tree rings from ancient Irish oaks show a sudden, severe cold snap around 1628, likely caused by volcanic ash blocking sunlight worldwide. Ice cores from Greenland hold sulfuric acid spikes from the same period, a telltale fingerprint of a massive eruption. Thera fits the bill perfectly, but dig into the ruins of Antikythera, the Minoan settlement buried under Thera's ash, and you'll find pottery styles that archaeologists date to a century later. So who's right? Both sides have compelling evidence. Some propose a compromise, that Thera erupted in stages with a smaller precursor event in 1628 and the cataclysmic finale decades later. Others argue the archaeological chronology itself might be off, skewed by gaps in the Egyptian records used to calibrate ancient timelines. Then there's the Atlantis connection. Plato's description of a circular island kingdom obliterated by earthquakes and floods eerily matches Thera's fate. If the eruption did occur around 1500, it lines up with the decline of the Minoans, advanced seafarers whose palaces, like Knossos, show sudden fire damage. Could their civilization have inspired Atlantis? But if Thera blew earlier, as the ice cores suggest, the timeline unravels, leaving us to wonder if Plato simply borrowed details from older oral traditions. Even more provocative is the link to the biblical Exodus. The book of Exodus describes darkness covering Egypt, waters turning bitter, and plagues of hail, events some scholars argue mirror volcanic effects. If Thera erupted in 1628, it predates most estimates for the Exodus by centuries. But if it's 1500, the pieces fit uncomfortably well. Could the pillar of cloud by day and fire by night, guiding the Israelites, have been Thera's towering ash column, visible from Egypt? The truth is, Thera's eruption doesn't just challenge our calendars, it blurs the line between natural disaster and myth. Whether it toppled empires, inspired scripture, or seeded legends, one thing's clear: when a volcano rewrites history, it doesn't leave neat answers. It leaves a mystery smoldering beneath the waves, waiting for the next clue to surface. Buried in the royal tombs of Mycenae, a golden face stared back at its discoverer with an expression frozen in time, not of peace but of haunting authority. When archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann lifted the so-called mask of Agamemnon from a dust-filled grave in 1876, he declared it the death mask of Homer's legendary king, a tangible link to the Trojan War's hero. But from the moment the artifact saw daylight, controversy followed. Was this truly a relic of the Bronze Age or Schliemann's greatest deception? The mask itself is undeniably striking, a thin sheet of hammered gold, its features meticulously detailed with a full beard, arched eyebrows, and closed eyes that seem centuries away from slumber. Schliemann's excitement was understandable. Unlike the stylized art of later Greek periods, this face felt startlingly human. But here's where things unravel. The mask was found in Grave Circle A, one of Mycenae's richest burial sites, yet it stood out from the other 4 gold masks discovered there. Those were cruder, almost childlike in comparison, with flattened features and simplified designs. The Agamemnon mask, by contrast, bore a sophistication that seemed out of place. Its beard curls too precise, its expression too lifelike. Experts quickly raised red flags. Stylistic analysis suggests the mask's craftsmanship aligns more with 8th century before the Common Era artistry, not the 16th century Mycenaean era it supposedly hails from. Even the technique is suspect. The mask's edges show signs of modern tool marks, unlike the other finds. Some scholars argue Schliemann, a self-taught excavator hungry for fame, may have commissioned a local artisan to forge it, blending ancient methods with artistic flair to create the perfect relic. Others propose a less sinister explanation that the mask is genuine, but simply belongs to a later period, misdated in the rush to connect it to Homer's epic. The timing of the discovery fuels doubts. Schliemann was under immense pressure to justify his dig's costs to sponsors, and nothing would captivate the public like a direct link to the Iliad's characters. His telegraph to the king of Greece proclaiming, "I have gazed upon the face of Agamemnon," reads more like a PR stunt than sober archaeology. Worse yet, Schliemann's excavation journals contain curious gaps and inconsistencies, leaving room for suspicion. Yet the mask's defenders point to a tantalizing detail: traces of ancient wear. Recent metallurgical tests reveal microscopic abrasions consistent with prolonged contact with a mummy's bandages, hinting it may indeed have adorned a royal corpse. And while its style is anomalous, artistic outliers exist in every era. Perhaps this was a masterwork reserved for a king unlike his peers. The truth may lie somewhere in between. Even if the mask isn't Agamemnon's, its discovery reshaped our understanding of Mycenaean culture, proving these were no mere mythic figures, but a wealthy, sophisticated civilization. Whether a masterpiece or a mirage, the mask endures as a symbol of archaeology's greatest challenge, separating fact from the seductive pull of legend. And perhaps that's the real mystery, not who wore the gold, but why we so desperately wanted it to be Agamemnon's. In the quiet archives of the Netherlands lies a book so controversial, it threatens to upend everything we know about ancient Mediterranean history. The Oera Linda book, a handwritten Frisian manuscript allegedly dating back to the 6th century before the Common Era, claims to chronicle a forgotten civilization, one that supposedly predated and influenced the Greeks, the Egyptians, even the builders of Stonehenge. According to its pages, a seafaring matriarchal society ruled northern Europe, their priestesses wielding advanced knowledge passed down through generations. But here's the twist: from the moment it surfaced in the 19th century, scholars have hotly debated whether it's a groundbreaking discovery or an elaborate hoax. The manuscript itself is a peculiar artifact. Written in a stylized Old Frisian language, it describes catastrophic floods, lost technologies, and a network of trade routes stretching from Scandinavia to the Mediterranean. Most explosively, it suggests that key elements of Greek mythology, philosophy, and even the alphabet were borrowed from these mysterious northerners. One passage claims the Minotaur's labyrinth was inspired by Frisian designs, while another implies that the goddess Athena might have roots in their pantheon. If true, this would rewrite the origins of Western civilization itself, but doubts swirl around its authenticity. The Oera Linda book first appeared in 1867, when Cornelis over de Linden handed it to a Dutch librarian, claiming it had been in his family for centuries. Linguists immediately noticed red flags. The text's Frisian contained anachronistic words and syntax, hinting at a much later composition. Radiocarbon dating of the paper placed it around the 18th or 19th century, long after its alleged creation. And then there's the timing. Its discovery coincided with a surge of European nationalism, making some suspect it was crafted to give Frisians a mythic past rivaling Greece or Rome. Yet believers counter with intriguing evidence. The book describes geographical details like submerged landmasses and ancient coastal routes that weren't fully mapped until centuries after its supposed writing. Some passages align eerily with modern discoveries about prehistoric climate change and sea level shifts. Could these details have been guessed by a 19th century forger? Or do they point to fragments of genuine oral traditions, preserved long enough to be recorded centuries later? The debate splits academia. Mainstream historians dismiss it as a romantic fabrication, while a fringe of researchers insists it holds kernels of truth, perhaps a distorted memory of the Bell Beaker culture or Doggerland's drowned societies. Either way, the Oera Linda book fascinates because it taps into a deeper question: how much of history is forever lost beneath the waves of time? And if even a fraction of its claims were real, what other forgotten civilizations might be waiting to shake the foundations of our past, deep in the wild mountains of Arcadia, where wolves still howled under the full moon? One of Greece's most unsettling rituals took root. According to legend, King Lycaon of Arcadia committed an atrocity so vile that Zeus transformed him into the first werewolf, but the story doesn't end there. This wasn't just a cautionary tale. It spawned an actual cult where initiates believed they could shapeshift into wolves, hunting under the cover of darkness in frenzied, blood-soaked rites. Were these ancient Arcadians truly descending into madness, or is there a darker, more tangible explanation behind their lupine delusions? The rituals of the Lycaea festival, held atop Mount Lycaean, read like something from a nightmare. Young men would gather during the festival, feasting on meat stewed with mysterious herbs. Those chosen as wolves would then strip naked and vanish into the forest, emerging days later, or so the legends claim, with their minds fractured, convinced they'd spent their time as beasts. Some accounts even speak of human sacrifice, claiming the stew contained flesh from a slaughtered boy, binding the eaters to their monstrous transformation. Unsurprisingly, later Greek writers like Plato condemned the Lycaea as barbaric, while Pausanias warned travelers to avoid the mountain altogether, lest they stumble upon something unholy. But beneath the horror, clues suggest a ritual far more complex than mere savagery. Mount Lycaean wasn't just a site of terror. It was a sacred space where Zeus himself was worshipped as Lycaeos, the wolf Zeus. The mountain's summit holds an eerie, ash-filled altar where no shadows are said to fall, even at midday. Could the cult's rites have been a form of ecstatic worship, blending communion with the god and symbolic rebirth as his sacred animal? Ancient texts hint at initiates shedding their humanity to become wolf-men, guardians of Zeus's wild domain. This wasn't mindless violence, it was a calculated descent into the primal, a way to harness the wolf's power under the god's watchful eye. Modern scholars offer even more provocative theories. The hallucinogenic roots of the ritual can't be ignored. Analysis of local flora reveals the presence of plants like henbane and belladonna, both known to cause delirium, heightened aggression, and even the sensation of metamorphosis. Mix these into the ritual stew, and suddenly the werewolf stories make terrifying sense. Imagine a young Arcadian, his mind aflame with toxins, sprinting through the woods under the moon, his skin prickling as if fur were bursting forth. To him, the transformation would feel utterly real. Yet there's another layer: mass hysteria. Anthropologists point to similar phenomena in medieval Europe and even modern times, where groups collectively believe they've become creatures. Combine sleep deprivation, rhythmic drumming, and the psychological pressure of initiation, and you've got a recipe for shared delusion. The Arcadians might not have been faking their lycanthropy. They might have genuinely believed it, their minds broken open by ritual and expectation. The most chilling possibility, that the Lycaea preserved a memory of something far older. Wolves were sacred to Proto-Indo-European cultures, linked to warrior initiation rites. The Arcadians, among Greece's oldest tribes, might have carried these traditions into the classical era, their rituals a distorted echo of prehistoric shamanism. Zeus's wolfish aspect could be the key, not a curse, but a gift, a way to touch the divine through the beast within. What lingers in Arcadia's ruins isn't just a monster myth, it's a window into how easily the line between man and beast can blur under the right conditions. Whether by poison, psychosis, or something far older, the werewolf cult forces us to ask, when the drums fade and the fires die, who's to say the wolf ever truly leaves? One quiet winter night in 373 before the Common Era, the earth beneath the prosperous city of Helike began to shudder in a way no Greek had ever felt before. Within hours, this bustling hub of trade, home to temples, theaters, and a famed sanctuary of Poseidon, vanished without a trace. Ancient writers described a nightmare scenario, the ground splitting open with deafening roars, jets of salt water erupting from fissures, and a tsunami so powerful it dragged entire buildings into the Corinthian Gulf. By dawn, Helice and all but a handful of its citizens were swallowed by the sea, leaving only twisted trees and floating corpses to mark its grave. For centuries, the fate of Helice lingered as both history and warning, referenced by everyone from the philosopher Aristotle to the Roman geographer Strabo. Yet despite its fame, the city's ruins proved as elusive as Atlantis. Early searches in the 1800s turned up nothing, and scholars began to wonder, had the disaster been exaggerated, or was Helice simply hiding in plain sight? The breakthrough came in 2001 when archaeologists combing through silt layers near the modern village of Rizamilos stumbled upon a row of ancient walls buried over 10 feet below ground. But here's where things got eerie. The structures weren't just damaged, they were spiraled, their foundations wrenched apart in a way that mirrored exactly what ancient sources described. The sea folded the city like a scroll. Diving deeper into the mud, researchers found bronze coins fused together by saltwater corrosion, pottery scattered mid-meal, and even human remains trapped in postures of flight. These weren't just artifacts, they were frozen moments of terror. Modern geology reveals the culprit. Helice sat directly atop a fault line where the African tectonic plate grinds against Europe. That night, a submarine landslide triggered by the quake sent a wall of water crashing inland while the land itself liquefied, dragging the city down like quicksand. The parallels to Atlantis are impossible to ignore. Both were wealthy coastal cities obliterated by the sea in a single cataclysmic night. Both became moral lessons about divine retribution, and both slipped into legend. But while Atlantis remains debated, Helice's rediscovery offers something rare, physical proof that the ancient world's most chilling tales might be rooted in real disasters. Even now, as divers map sunken streets and robotic probes scan the Gulf's depths, the site whispers a humbling truth. The same forces that erased Helice could strike again because the Earth never forgets how to drown a city. Imagine a towering bronze colossus, its hollow veins filled with molten metal, patrolling the shores of Crete with unstoppable fury. This wasn't just a creature of myth, it was Tolos, the ancient world's most terrifying automaton, a mechanical guardian forged by the god Hephaestus himself. Ancient Greeks described him circling the island 3 times daily, hurling boulders at invading ships and roasting enemies with his superheated embrace. But here's what makes this legend truly spine-tingling. Tolos wasn't just a fanciful story. He might represent humanity's first imagined robot, a blueprint for artificial life centuries before the word technology even existed. The details in ancient texts are eerily precise. Tolos had a single vein running from his neck to his ankle, sealed by a bronze nail, his only weakness. His body was animated by Ichor, the divine equivalent of blood, keeping his metal limbs in perpetual motion. Some accounts even describe him performing complex tasks beyond brute force, like judging disputes or enforcing laws. This wasn't just a mindless weapon, it was a thinking, decision-making machine. The parallels to modern robotics are uncanny. An artificial intelligence with programmed directives, a power source Ichor standing in for electricity, and a fail-safe, that infamous ankle bolt. What's even more startling is how Tolos predates later mechanical marvels. Centuries before Da Vinci sketched his self-propelled cart or Hero of Alexandria built steam-powered devices, Greek poets envisioned a fully autonomous being. The myth might have roots in real-world inspiration. Minoan artisans were masters of bronze craftsmanship, and the legend could reflect early experiments with pulleys, gears, or even primitive hydraulic systems. Some historians point to the Antikythera Mechanism as proof that the Greeks were capable of astonishing mechanical complexity. Why not a moving statue? Yet Tolo's downfall holds a haunting lesson. In the myth, the sorceress Medea defeats him by removing the ankle bolt, draining his life force. It's a cautionary tale about humanity's fraught relationship with artificial life. The fear that our creations might one day turn against us, or that their very existence threatens the natural order. This tension still echoes today, from Frankenstein's monster to debates about AI ethics. The most tantalizing theory, Tolo's might not have been pure fiction. Bronze cult statues with articulated limbs existed in ancient temples, possibly designed to move during rituals via hidden mechanisms. Could the myth have grown from rumors of these marvels, or was Tolo's a metaphor for Crete's impregnable defenses, its navy, its walls, its technology recast as a godlike machine? Either way, Tolo stands as a testament to humanity's timeless obsession with playing God. Long before silicon chips and algorithms, we dreamed of metal giants and the power to breathe life into the lifeless. And in that dream, we see the first sparks of a future we're still racing toward today. On the windswept island of Samothrace, where the Aegean Sea crashes against rugged cliffs, an ancient mystery unfolded in the shadows, one so secretive that even now, after centuries of excavation, we know less about it than the famous Eleusinian Mysteries. Here, in a sprawling sanctuary tucked between pine forests and rocky shores, initiates gathered to worship the Kabari, enigmatic gods whose very names were whispered rather than spoken aloud. Unlike the agricultural focus of Demeter's cult at Eleusis, the Samothrace mysteries were steeped in the world of sailors, storms, and the ever-present danger of the deep. But what exactly transpired in those torchlit rituals, and why have their secrets proven even harder to crack? The Kabari themselves are a puzzle. Often depicted as smiths or dwarfish figures, these deities were believed to hold power over metallurgy, fertility, and most crucially, safe passage at sea. Ancient sources describe them as capricious, capable of calming waves or summoning tempests on a whim. For sailors navigating the treacherous waters of the northern Aegean, initiation into their mysteries wasn't just spiritual insurance, it was a matter of survival. The sanctuary's location says it all. Perched on a remote island, far from major trade routes, yet perfectly positioned for those desperate to appease the gods of the deep before braving open water. What little we know about the rites comes from scattered hints in pottery fragments and the accounts of outsiders. Initiates underwent a ceremony called the Maesis, where they were led blindfolded through a series of trials, their ears filled with the clashing of cymbals and the chanting of priests. Unlike Eleusis, where the climax involved a visionary revelation, Samothrace's rituals seem to have centered on physical ordeals, perhaps symbolic drownings or mock shipwrecks designed to test devotion. The reward, a prized iron ring, said to grant the wearer protection from storms and knowledge of the Kabari's true names, a secret so potent it could allegedly calm the sea itself. The naval connection runs deeper than mere superstition. Archaeologists have found anchors and ship models among the sanctuary's offerings, alongside inscriptions from grateful captains who credited the gods with their survival. One particularly chilling discovery was a series of lead tablets inscribed with curses, hurled into ritual pits by initiates hoping to sabotage rival ships. This wasn't just worship, it was a form of ancient maritime warfare, where divine favor could mean the difference between profit and ruin. Yet the most haunting gap in our knowledge isn't the rituals, it's the silence. Unlike Eleusis, where even fragmented texts and artwork offer glimpses of the rites, Samothrace's initiates left almost no record of their experiences. The few descriptions we have come from outsiders like the historian Herodotus, who admitted he was never allowed past the outer courtyard. Even the sanctuary's layout is enigmatic, a jumble of altars, underground chambers, and a strange circular building called the Anaktoron, where the innermost secrets may have been revealed. Some scholars argue this secrecy was deliberate. While Eleusis catered to Athens' political elite, Samothrace served a rougher, more transient crowd: sailors, mercenaries, and traders who needed portable, practical magic. Their mysteries weren't about enlightenment but raw survival, and the less written down, the safer their power remained. Others suggest the cabaret's cult was simply older, its roots tangled in pre-Greek traditions that resisted easy assimilation into classical mythology. Perhaps the most tantalizing clue lies in the sanctuary's magnetic stones. Samothrace is rich in lodestone, a naturally magnetic mineral the Greeks believed held mystical properties. Could initiates have used these stones in their rites, creating illusions of floating objects or divine attractions? It's a theory that would explain the cult's reputed control over metals and the eerie silence surrounding how those powers were harnessed. Whatever the truth, the Samothrace mysteries endure as a reminder that some secrets sink deeper than others. While Eleusis' vanished knowledge feels like a lost library, Samothrace is more like a shipwreck, its treasures scattered, its purpose half buried in the sands, waiting for the next tide to reveal a little more. And for the sailors who once prayed there, that may have been the point all along. Some mysteries aren't meant for land dwellers but belong forever to the sea. At the height of their glory, the Pythian Games rivaled even the Olympics in prestige, drawing athletes, musicians, and poets to Delphi's sacred slopes every 4 years. Crowned with laurel instead of olive wreaths, victors here weren't just celebrated, they were believed to carry the favor of Apollo himself. Yet while Olympias Games endure in global memory, the Pythian Games vanished so completely, most people today have never heard their name. How did a spectacle once deemed second only to the Olympics fade into the shadows of history? The decline wasn't sudden, but a slow unraveling tied to Delphi's waning power. Unlike Olympia, which thrived as a neutral ground for pan-Hellenic unity, Delphi's games were deeply entwined with its oracle's political influence. By the 4th century before the Common Era, as city-states squabbled and Macedon rose, the oracle's prophecies grew suspect, tainted by accusations of bribery and manipulation. When a Thessalian noble allegedly paid the Pythia to declare his rival cursed, or when Sparta was caught funneling gold to sway divine verdicts, the sanctuary's reputation cracked. Athletes began prioritizing Olympia, where victory carried purer prestige. Then came the financial blows. The Pythian Games relied on lavish donations from visiting pilgrims and patron kings, but as Delphi's spiritual stock plummeted, so did its coffers. Olympia had its sacred olive groves, a self-sustaining source of wealth. Delphi, its treasure houses were looted by Phocian generals in the Third Sacred War, its treasuries emptied to pay mercenaries. By the time Rome absorbed Greece, the games were a hollow shell, their once grand musical competitions reduced to amateur recitals, their athletic events overshadowed by gladiatorial spectacles. The final nail came with Christianity's rise. While Olympia's pagan roots were tolerated as cultural heritage, Delphi's ties to prophecy made it a target. Emperor Theodosius's ban on pagan festivals in 393 spelled the end, but the Pythian Games had already been gasping for air. Olympia persisted as a nostalgic symbol of Greek identity. Delphi's contests, though older, lacked that emotional tether. What's haunting isn't just the game's disappearance, but how thoroughly they were forgotten. Olympia's ruins became a pilgrimage site for romantics and scholars. Delphi's stadium, where runners once raced under Apollo's gaze, sits crumbling and overlooked, the difference legacy. The Olympics became an idea bigger than any one place revived, reimagined, eternal. The Pythian Games were bound to a sanctuary whose gods fell silent, their memory dissolving like mist off Parnassus. And that's the cruelest twist. In the end, not even the oracle could predict its own irrelevance. On the walls of Knossos, frozen in mid-leap for over 3,000 years, a young man somersaults over the back of a charging bull, his body arched in perfect defiance of gravity, his fate hanging in the balance. This is the bull leaping fresco, one of the most iconic images of the Minoan world. but beneath its vibrant colors lies a debate that splits scholars down the middle. Was this a real sport, a deadly display of athleticism, or something far more sacred, a ritual dance with the divine? The fresco's composition is undeniably dynamic. Three figures interact with the bull. One grasps its horns, another mid-flip over its back, and a third poised to catch the leaper. The details are too precise to dismiss as mere symbolism. The tension in the bull's muscles, the controlled arcs of the acrobats' bodies. Ancient texts from neighboring cultures like Egypt mention bull leaping as a genuine spectacle, and modern experiments have proven it's physically possible if suicidally dangerous. Historical reenactors using trained bulls have recreated the moves, though not without broken bones and close calls. The physics checks out. A charging bull's momentum can propel a skilled leaper, provided they time it perfectly. Yet there's another layer, the spiritual. Bulls weren't just animals to the Minoans, they were incarnations of power, linked to their earth-shaking god, the Minotaur's sire. Frescoes and figurines across Crete show bulls in sacred contexts, often surrounded by worshippers. The leapers aren't just athletes, they're bare-chested, clad in ritual loincloths, their daring feats echoing later myths of heroes like Theseus battling the bull-headed monster. Could these performances have been rites of passage, testing courage and communion with the divine? Some scholars point to the fresco's setting. It adorned a palace chamber, not an arena, suggesting it commemorated ceremonies, not sport. The truth might lie somewhere in between. Minoan society blurred the lines between spectacle and sacrament. Even today, cultures from Spain's recortadors to India's Jallikattu weave danger and devotion into bull-handling traditions. Perhaps Knosso's leapers were both athletes and priests, their flips a form of worship as much as showmanship. The fresco doesn't just capture a moment, it immortalizes a question: how far would you go to touch the divine? And whether as sport or sacrifice, those vibrant figures remind us, some leaps aren't just about surviving the bull, but mastering the impossible. Imagine an island so sacred that giving birth or dying there was considered a crime against the gods. This wasn't some mythical realm. It was Delos, the glittering heart of the Cyclades and the legendary birthplace of Apollo and Artemis. By the 5th century before the Common Era, the Athenians declared Delos a pure space, ordering all graves exhumed and every pregnant woman or terminally ill person banished to neighboring islands. But this wasn't just religious zeal, it was a logistical nightmare wrapped in ancient taboos, revealing how far societies will go to control the uncontrollable, life and death. The reasoning behind the purification was deceptively simple. Delos wasn't just any holy site, it was the epicenter of Apollo's cult, where myth insisted Leto clung to a palm tree to deliver her divine twins. Physical purity mirrored spiritual purity, and death or childbirth, messy, bloody, and steeped in ritual impurity, threatened to stain the island's sacred aura. One ancient source claims even the smell of decay could offend the gods, but beneath the piety lay political savvy. Athens, freshly in control of Delos, used the purification to rebrand the island as a neutral, pan-Hellenic sanctuary, scrubbing away traces of rival factions' burials while flexing their administrative muscle. The real insanity lay in execution. Relocating graves meant digging up centuries of bones, aristocrats, warriors, even generations of priests, and hauling them across the choppy Aegean to the tiny island of Rhenaia, a mile away. Archaeologists have found over 30,000 graves there, a silent city of the dead stacked with headstones reading, "Moved from Delos by order of the Athenians." Families were forced to exhume ancestors mid-decomposition, risking disease and divine wrath. Imagine the scene, mourners rowing skulls and shrouds to their new resting place, praying the gods wouldn't curse them for disturbing the dead. Then there were the living. Midwives faced a grim duty. Any woman nearing childbirth had to be ferried off Delos, sometimes in stormy seas, with no guarantee of survival. The sick, a death sentence. Records tell of feverish patients dragged onto boats, their last breaths taken at sea just to technically avoid dying on sacred soil. The irony, Apollo himself was a god of healing, yet his birthplace denied the dying comfort in their final moments. What makes the Delos purification so haunting isn't just its brutality, but its fragility. Despite all efforts, the taboos collapsed under Rome's rise. By the 1st century, Delos became a bustling slave market, its temples overshadowed by warehouses, its purity laws forgotten. The graves, some were quietly smuggled back. The gods, it seemed, cared less about human rules than mortals hoped. Delos' story is a reminder: you can exile death, but it always finds its way home. Sparta's legendary constitution was the envy of the ancient world, a system so flawless. Philosophers like Plato and Aristotle studied it like a blueprint for the perfect society. Its architect, the semi-mythical lawgiver Lycurgus, supposedly crafted every detail with divine inspiration, from the rigid military training to the communal meals meant to forge unbreakable brotherhood. But here's the twist: not a single line of these laws was ever written down. Sparta's entire legal code existed solely in the memories of its citizens, passed orally from generation to generation like a sacred chant. And when Sparta finally fell, those words vanished into the air, leaving behind only fragments and second-hand accounts. How could a civilization stake its identity on laws that were never recorded? And what does their disappearance say about the fragility of history itself? The reasoning behind this oral tradition was deliberate and chillingly Spartan. Lycurgus allegedly banned written laws because he wanted his system to live not on parchment, but in the blood and bone of every citizen. Words on a page could be debated, reinterpreted, or corrupted, but words seared into the mind through relentless repetition, those became unshakable dogma. Young Spartans didn't just learn the law, they internalized it through brutal drills, public shaming, and the constant threat of exile for any lapse. The result was a society where obedience wasn't just expected, it was instinctive. As the historian Plutarch put it, Lycurgus' laws didn't need writing because they were engraved in the hearts of the Spartans by discipline alone. Yet this strength became Sparta's greatest vulnerability. Unlike Athens, whose laws were carved into stone for all to see, Sparta's reliance on memory meant its constitution was only as durable as the people who upheld it. When the city-state's power crumbled in the 4th century before the Common Era, its institutions eroded with it, conquered by Thebes, then absorbed into Rome. The Spartans who once memorized every syllable of Lycurgus' code scattered or assimilated. Within a few generations, even the descendants of Sparta's kings struggled to recite the original laws. The few surviving accounts we have, like those of Plutarch or Xenophon, are riddled with contradictions, filtered through foreign observers who never experienced the system firsthand. The irony is almost poetic. Sparta feared the written word would dilute its traditions, but in the end, orality doomed them to oblivion. Athens' democracy, for all its chaos, left behind speeches, decrees, and court records that let us reconstruct its ideals. Sparta's warrior ethos, we're left piecing together half-remembered aphorisms and romanticized anecdotes. Even the famed agoge, the brutal training system that forged Spartan boys into soldiers, survives only as a hazy outline, its daily routines, songs, and secret rituals lost to time. The most haunting question isn't just why the laws disappeared, but how much we've misread what little remains. Later admirers, from Renaissance scholars to modern militarists, projected their own fantasies onto Sparta, turning its fragments into myth. Without written records, there's no way to separate Lycurgus' original vision from the exaggerations of awestruck outsiders. Was Sparta truly the disciplined utopia described by Plato, or was its constitution, like its unwritten laws, more flexible in practice than legend claims? Perhaps the real lesson of Sparta's silence isn't about the past but the present. Every society relies on stories to bind itself together, national anthems, founding myths, shared slogans. But when those stories exist only in echoes, they become mirrors, reflecting whatever each generation wants to see. Sparta's ghost lingers not because we know it, but precisely because we don't. And in that void, its whispers grow louder than any written word could ever be. High in the rugged slopes of Mount Parnassus, hidden beneath a canopy of gnarled pines, lies a cavern so steeped in eerie offerings that even modern archaeologists hesitate at its mouth, the Corycian Cave. Named after the nymph Corycia, this gaping limestone hollow was sacred to Apollo and the Muses, but the relics left behind tell a far darker story than poetry and prophecy. Stacks of human skulls, rusted weapons, and strange clay figurines with hollow eyes litter the cave's chambers, some dating back to the Bronze Age. Who brought these macabre gifts, and what desperate rites unfolded in the flickering torchlight of this subterranean sanctuary? The cave's most unsettling discoveries came in the 1970s, when French archaeologists sifted through centuries of debris to uncover layers of ritual deposits. Among the expected votives, ceramic cups, bronze jewelry, were bones, not animal bones but human, arranged in deliberate piles alongside miniature thrones and daggers bent as if killed like their wielders. One niche held the skulls of at least 12 individuals, their eye sockets gazing blankly at a rusted iron helmet placed ceremoniously at their center. The message was chilling. This wasn't just worship, it was bargaining with forces beyond mortal understanding. What makes these finds so perplexing isn't just their violence, but their variety. The artifacts span millennia, from Mycenaean-era pottery to Roman-era coins, suggesting the cave served as a magnet for clandestine rituals across generations. Some scholars argue the skulls were war trophies, offerings by victorious soldiers to thank the gods for survival. Others see panic deposits, pleas for protection during plagues or invasions, where the dead themselves became currency to appease the divine. The bent weapons might symbolize vows never to fight again, while the tiny thrones could represent abdicated power, left to rot in the dark as sacrifices of pride. Then there are the whispers of the Corycian nymphs themselves. Ancient texts describe frenzied rites held here in their honor, where maenads and mystics danced themselves into trances, channeling primal spirits. Could the skulls be remnants of initiation ceremonies, where the cave's notorious acoustics, a natural echo chamber, amplified chants into hallucinatory crescendos? Modern experiments show that even a whisper in the deepest chamber reverberates like a ghostly chorus, a phenomenon that might have convinced worshippers they stood at the threshold of the underworld. Yet the cave guards its secrets fiercely. No inscriptions explain the offerings, no murals depict the rituals. The closest clue comes from a cryptic passage in Plutarch mentioning night roamers who gathered in the cave during times of crisis, leaving behind what they held most dear. Whether that meant lives, treasures, or terror itself, we may never know. But one thing's certain, the Corycian Cave wasn't just a temple. It was a mirror held up to humanity's darkest desperation, where the line between devotion and dread dissolved into the shadows, one skull at a time. Under the cloak of night, in the thick forests beyond the edges of Greek cities, something primal stirred. A frenzied drumbeat, the shrieks of women, and the raw, tearing sound of flesh being ripped apart. This wasn't just revelry, this was the Dionysian frenzy, where followers of the god of wine and ecstasy surrendered to a state of divine madness that blurred the line between human and beast. To witness these rites was to stare into the heart of something ancient and terrifying, a ritual where civilization's restraints crumbled and the wildness within burst free. At the center of these mysteries stood the maenads, women who abandoned their looms and homes to vanish into the wilderness, their hair loose, their bodies draped in fawn skins. Ancient texts describe them wielding thyrsi staffs tipped with pine cones, dancing with such abandon that their movements became a blur. But this wasn't mere celebration. When the frenzy peaked, they turned violent, seizing animals, sometimes even bulls, and tearing them apart barehanded in a ritual called sparagmos. The flesh wasn't wasted, it was consumed raw, a ghastly communion where the Maenads believed they were devouring the god himself, taking his power into their bodies. What fueled this madness? The Greeks called it divine possession, but modern scholars see something more complex. Dionysian rites often involved wine, of course, but also potent herbal concoctions likely laced with hallucinogens like ergot or belladonna. Imagine the scene, a moonlit clearing, the air thick with smoke from torches and burning herbs, the women's senses heightened by toxins that made the trees seem to writhe and the god's voice whisper in the wind. In this state, the impossible felt real, the boundary between self and spirit dissolved, and the act of tearing a bull apart might feel less like violence and more like a sacred duty. Yet there's another layer to this frenzy, one of psychological release. Greek society, especially for women, was tightly controlled. The Dionysian cult offered a rare space where they could shed their roles as wives and mothers, stepping into a temporary world of power and abandon. For a few nights, they weren't pawns of men. They were untouchable, feared, even holy. The historian Euripides captured this duality in the Bacchae, where the Maenads, once gentle, become monstrous when cornered, using their bare hands to destroy an entire army. Was this a warning about repressed desires unleashed, or a testament to the raw strength society usually forced them to hide? The rituals weren't confined to the wilderness. In cities, Dionysus followers staged orgia, not the modern sense of the word, but chaotic, ecstatic processions where participants wore masks, blurred gender lines, and inverted social norms. Slaves became masters, the poor feasted like kings, and the rigid order of daily life was upended. These weren't just parties, they were pressure valves, moments where the tensions of an oppressive society could explode in a controlled, sacred way. But the darkest question lingers: were these rites as violent as the stories claim? Some argue the tales of sparagmos were exaggerated moral fables to warn against the dangers of excess. Others point to archaeological evidence, like the bones of dismembered animals found in remote groves, as proof. Either way, the Dionysian frenzy forces us to confront a truth about ancient Greece and perhaps humanity itself. Beneath the marble statues and philosophical debates, there was always a wildness waiting to break free, a hunger for transcendence that couldn't be tamed by reason alone. And in those moonlit forests, for one fleeting night, it did. Buried beneath layers of volcanic ash and millennia of silence, the clay tablets of ancient Crete hold a message we still can't read: Linear A, the cryptic script of the Minoan. Unlike its younger cousin Linear B, which was cracked in the 1950s to reveal an early form of Greek, Linear A remains one of the world's most stubborn linguistic puzzles. Imagine discovering a locked diary from a vanished civilization, its pages filled with symbols just familiar enough to tease your understanding, yet utterly indecipherable. That's the maddening allure of Linear A, a script that refuses to surrender its secrets, even as it whispers tantalizing clues about Europe's first advanced culture. At first glance, Linear A and Linear B look like siblings. Both use similar symbols, abstract lines, stick figures, and geometric shapes arranged in horizontal lines across clay tablets. Many signs overlap between the two scripts, leading early researchers to hope deciphering Linear B would unlock Linear A. But here's the twist: Linear B was used to write Greek, while Linear A encodes a completely unknown language. Think of it like using the same alphabet to write English and Mandarin. Recognizing the letters doesn't mean you understand the words. When linguist Michael Ventris broke Linear B, he had the Rosetta Stone advantage of a known underlying language. Linear A offers no such foothold. The context of these tablets deepens the mystery. Most Linear A inscriptions come from palace archives, lists of goods, quantities, and transactions. Yet, unlike Linear B's dry inventories, Linear A tablets often include symbols resembling plants, animals, and what might be gods. hinting at a blend of practical record-keeping and sacred notation. One recurring sign looks like a temple, another like a sheaf of wheat. Are these literal depictions or abstract phonetic symbols? Without a bilingual inscription or a living descendant language, we're left guessing. Efforts to crack the code have taken wild turns. Some researchers apply the same techniques used for Linear B, assuming linear represents a syllabic language where each symbol stands for a consonant-vowel pair. This approach has yielded possible word roots like ku-ro for total, but these remain speculative. Others argue linear could be a logosyllabic script like Sumerian cuneiform, mixing symbols for whole words with phonetic elements. Then there's the fringe theory linking it to the hypothetical Tyrrhenian language family, tying Minoan to later Etruscan, but without concrete evidence, it's linguistic wishful thinking. The most haunting possibility, linear might not belong to any known language family. The Minoans were cultural outliers, their origins shrouded in prehistory. If their language was truly isolated with no living relatives, decipherment could require a conceptual leap we haven't yet imagined. Every attempted breakthrough statistical analysis, pattern recognition, even AI, has hit the same wall: too little data, too much ambiguity. What makes linear more than a scholarly curiosity is what it conceals. These tablets likely hold the mundane details of Minoan life, tax records, prayers, trade contracts, but also, perhaps, poetry, laws, or myths that could reshape our understanding of the ancient Mediterranean. Until we crack it, the Minoans remain half-heard, their stories trapped behind a wall of symbols. And that's the cruelest irony. We can admire their art, walk their palaces, even read their successors' words, but the voices of Europe's first great civilization, they're still waiting to speak. While Delphi's oracle basked in the spotlight of ancient Greece, another sacred site whispered prophecies in the shadows: Olympia. Best known as the birthplace of the Olympic Games, this sprawling sanctuary to Zeus held a secret. It was home to a lesser-known but equally fascinating oracle, the Olympia Prophecy Center. Unlike Delphi's frenzied Pythia, Olympia's seers practiced a quieter, more methodical form of divination, one entwined with the very essence of competition and fate. So why has history all but forgotten this rival oracle, and what made its approach so different? The answer lies in Olympia's dual identity. While Delphi was a spiritual nerve center, Olympia was a stage, a place where mortal strength and divine will collided. Athletes flocked here to prove themselves before the gods, but they also sought glimpses of the future, especially before races or bouts. The oracle's methods reflected this athletic precision. Instead of cryptic riddles, Olympia's seers reportedly used a combination of dice, numbered tokens, and even the flights of birds to deliver clear, actionable advice. Imagine a sprinter rolling a set of knuckle-bones before a race, interpreting the results as a sign to push harder or hold back. This wasn't just fortune-telling, it was strategy dressed in sacred garb. Yet Olympia's oracle faced an ironic hurdle: its own fame. The Olympics overshadowed its prophetic role, turning the sanctuary into a symbol of physical prowess rather than mystical insight. Delphi's ambiguity made its prophecies adaptable, ensuring their survival in histories and legends. Olympia's straightforward answers, by contrast, lacked the dramatic flair that immortalizes myths. When an athlete won or lost based on a seer's advice, the credit or blame went to skill, not the gods. Practicality doesn't inspire epic poetry. Archaeology hints at a deeper layer. Excavations reveal a small, unassuming structure near Zeus's great altar, its walls lined with inscriptions thanking the oracle for victory. One particularly chilling find was a collection of lead curse tablets, buried by competitors hoping to hex their rivals', proof that even in this arena of fair play, divine manipulation lurked beneath the surface. The real mystery isn't why Olympia's oracle faded, but why we assumed it was ever secondary. Perhaps the greatest prophecy it offered was this: in the end, history remembers the spectacle, not the whispers behind it. And that's a lesson far older than the games themselves. In the olive groves of Pylos, where the earth had kept its secrets for 3,500 years, archaeologists made a discovery in 2015 that rewrote our understanding of the Mycenaean world: the Griffin warrior tomb. Unlike the grand beehive tombs of Mycenae, this grave was modest, a 5-foot-deep pit lined with stone, but inside lay a single skeleton surrounded by treasures so lavish, so unexpected, that they shattered assumptions about this shadowy period between the Minoan collapse and the rise of Greek city-states. The warrior himself was a mystery. Buried on his back with a bronze sword resting on his chest, he was clearly a man of importance, but not royalty. His bones told a story of strength. Thick muscle attachments and healed fractures hinted at a life of combat. Yet it was the objects encircling him that stole the spotlight. An ivory plaque carved with a griffin, a mythical beast with the body of a lion and the head of an eagle, gave the tomb its name. But the real astonishment came from the grave goods. Over 1,400 artifacts, many unlike anything found in mainland Greece before. There were gold rings so finely detailed they could only have been crafted by Minoan hands, their swirling patterns depicting bull leapers and goddesses. A necklace of amber beads traced back to the Baltic, thousands of miles away. A bronze mirror with an ivory handle showed traces of cinnabar, suggesting it was used to apply the reddish pigment, perhaps ceremonially, perhaps in life. Most baffling of all was a sealstone no larger than a thumbnail, its surface etched with such precision that modern jewelers struggle to replicate it. The scene: a warrior driving his sword into an opponent while a supernatural figure, possibly a goddess, hovers above. This wasn't just art, it was a microcosm of Mycenaean beliefs frozen in stone. Who was this man? The absence of grandiose architecture suggests he wasn't a king, but the richness of his grave implies something rarer, a warlord or merchant prince bridging two worlds. His tomb dates to around 1450 before the Common Era, a time when Minoan Crete was crumbling and Mycenaean Greeks were absorbing their culture. The hybrid nature of his goods tells a story of upheaval and opportunity. Those Minoan rings might have been war prizes, loot from raids on Knossos, or perhaps he was a diplomat marrying into Cretan elite and bringing artisans back to the mainland. The Baltic amber hints at trade networks stretching far beyond the Aegean, while the sealstone's imagery echoes later Homeric tales of heroes favored by gods. The real enigma isn't just his identity, but why his burial style vanished. Later Mycenaean elites built tholos tombs, grand stone chambers fit for kings. The Griffin warrior's simple pit grave feels almost archaic by comparison, a fleeting snapshot of a society in flux. His tomb captures a moment when warrior culture and Minoan sophistication collided before the rigid hierarchies of classical Greece took hold. What lingers isn't just the gold or the bones, but the questions. Was he a mercenary who struck it rich, a pirate turned aristocrat, or evidence of a forgotten dynasty that ruled Pylos before Nestor's palace rose? The truth may lie in the unbroken sealstones still waiting to be deciphered, or in the warrior's unread DNA. Clues to a time when legends weren't yet myths, but living men who walked the line between brute and king. And in that darkened pit, surrounded by the spoils of a lost world, the Griffin warrior keeps his silence for now. Thebes, a city often overshadowed by Sparta and Athens in the tales of ancient Greece, harbored one of history's most unconventional and formidable fighting forces, the Sacred Band. Unlike any other army of its time, this elite unit consisted of 150 pairs of male lovers, handpicked not just for their strength or skill, but for the unbreakable bonds between them. The idea was as radical as it was simple. Men fighting side by side with their beloved would rather die than shame themselves in front of their partner. The result, a battalion so fierce it went undefeated for over 3 decades, striking fear into the hearts of even the most seasoned warriors. The sacred band's origins trace back to the late 4th century before the Common Era, when Thebes sought to break free from Spartan dominance. The military innovator Gorgidas is credited with forming the unit, drawing inspiration from an old Theban tradition that celebrated the martial potential of same-sex partnerships. But this wasn't just about sentimentality, there was cold, hard logic at work. Ancient Greek culture revered the concept of philia, a deep, almost sacred bond between comrades. When that bond was romantic, the stakes soared. A soldier fighting beside his lover wouldn't just defend his city, he'd fight to protect the person who meant everything to him. The historian Plutarch put it bluntly, a band cemented by friendship grounded upon love is never to be broken. Their battlefield record speaks for itself. At the Battle of Leuctra in 371, the sacred band formed the spearhead of the Theban forces against Sparta's numerically superior army. Through a daring tactical maneuver, concentrating their strength on one flank, they shattered the myth of Spartan invincibility, killing the Spartan king Cleombrotus and sending his troops into retreat. Later, at the Battle of Tegeira, they routed a force twice their size, proving their prowess wasn't just luck. Their secret, a synergy that went beyond drills and discipline. These men moved as one, their coordination honed by intimacy and trust. Yet the nature of their relationships fuels debate even today. Were these pairs genuinely romantic, or was their bond a calculated military strategy? Some scholars argue the sacred band's relationships were primarily platonic, a pragmatic alliance of brothers in arms leveraging social cohesion for combat efficiency. Others point to the erotic undertones in Greek poetry and art celebrating the unit, suggesting these were full-fledged love affairs. The truth likely lies somewhere in between, a blend of affection and utility where personal devotion amplified battlefield effectiveness. The sacred band's end was as dramatic as their reign. At the Battle of Chaeronea in 338, they faced Philip Roman II of Macedon and his young son Alexander. Outmaneuvered by Philip's phalanx, the band fought to the last man, their bodies found piled together in death as they had stood in life. The victors, perhaps in awe, erected a monument, the Lion of Chaeronea, that still marks their mass grave. Their legacy, however, outlasted even stone. For centuries, their story was a whisper, a challenge to conventional notions of love and war. Today, they stand as a testament to the untapped power of human connection, proof that sometimes the strongest armor isn't steel, but the heart of the person fighting beside you. For centuries, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon have been celebrated as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, a lush, towering paradise of terraced greenery rising above the Mesopotamian desert. But here's the twist, there's no physical evidence these gardens ever existed in Babylon. No ruins, no contemporary accounts, not even a single Babylonian text mentioning their construction. Meanwhile, 300 miles to the north, another empire left behind astonishing clues pointing to a very different origin story. One involving an Assyrian king with a Greek wife and a garden so magnificent, it might have inspired the legend itself. The confusion begins with the ancient sources. The only detailed descriptions of the Hanging Gardens come from later Greek historians like Strabo and Diodorus Siculus, who wrote about them centuries after their supposed construction. But their accounts are riddled with inconsistencies, from the garden's location to their engineering. Babylon's flat, arid landscape makes the idea of cascading terraces seem implausible without an advanced irrigation system. Yet no archaeological traces of such a system have ever been found there. Meanwhile, in Nineveh, the capital of Assyria, excavations have revealed something astonishing. An elaborate network of aqueducts, canals, and even an early form of the Archimedes screw, all dating to the reign of King Sennacherib in the 7th century before the Common Era. Sennacherib's own inscriptions boast of an unrivaled palace, surrounded by gardens where exotic plants flourished year-round. His engineers diverted mountain springs into a sprawling system of waterways, lifting water to the palace heights with precisely the kind of machinery the Greeks later described. But the most intriguing detail, Sennacherib's queen Tashmatu Sharat, was possibly of Greek origin, part of a diplomatic marriage linking Assyria to the Hellenic world. Could Greek travelers encountering these gardens generations later have transplanted the story to Babylon, a city more familiar to their audiences? The theory gains traction when you examine the archaeology of Nineveh. British archaeologist Stephanie Daly's work in the early 2000s uncovered carved reliefs showing tiered gardens with pillared walkways strikingly similar to Greek descriptions. Even more compelling, Sennacherib's inscriptions mention a garden like Mount Amanus, referencing a lush, forested region known to the Greeks. The linguistic trail is equally fascinating. The Greek word kremastos, meaning hanging, might have been a mistranslation of the Assyrian term for overhanging, describing gardens built on terraces or roofs. If the hanging gardens truly belonged to Nineveh, it rewrites not just the story of a wonder, but the interconnectedness of the ancient world. This wouldn't be an isolated Babylonian marvel, but a product of Assyrian engineering brilliance and cross-cultural exchange, a testament to how myths travel and evolve. The gardens might not have dangled precariously over Babylon's walls, but they could have cascaded down the slopes of Nineveh's palaces, a shared legacy between empires we're only now beginning to untangle. And that leaves us with one haunting question. How many other wonders have we been looking for in all the wrong places? Ancient Greece was a civilization of contradictions where logic and legend walked hand in hand, and where the line between history and myth often blurred beyond recognition. From the precision of the Antikythera Mechanism to the haunting whispers of the Oracle of Delphi, these 30 unexplained phenomena reveal a world far stranger and more sophisticated than textbooks often suggest. Think of the Phaistos Disc, its cryptic symbols stamped into clay like a code waiting to be cracked, or the Spartan crypteia, where young men became wolves in the night, their rituals steeped in terror and tradition. The sacred insanity of Dionysian rites, the lost laws of Lycurgus, the ghostly echoes of Linear A. Each mystery peels back another layer of a culture that thrived on pushing boundaries, both human and divine. What makes these enigmas so enduring isn't just their age, but what they say about the Greek mindset. Here was a society that built the world's first analog computer while still believing in bronze giants and oracles breathing divine fumes. They measured the stars yet charted the underworld, composed symphonies yet howled at the moon. Their greatest legacy might be this duality, the unshakable belief that the universe could be both calculated and enchanted. Now it's your turn. Which of these mysteries lingers in your thoughts? The sunken streets of Helaik, the werewolf cult of Arcadia, or perhaps the griffin warrior's tomb where a single man's grave rewrote history? Drop your favorite in the comments. We're itching to hear your theories. And if you're hungry for more unsolved puzzles, stay tuned. The ancient world is full of stories waiting to be unraveled, and we're just getting started. Until then, keep questioning, keep wondering, and remember, sometimes the past's most thrilling secrets are the ones it refuses